coffee shop on the edge of Naval Base Coronado wasn't much to look at. Just a small brick building with faded blue paint and a hand-painted sign that read, Marina's Coffee. But every morning at 0500, it filled with some of the most elite warriors in the world, Navy SEALs, and every morning, Marina Vasquez served them their coffee with a quiet smile and steady hands. She was 32 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and eyes that seemed older than her years. She wore jeans and a plain black t-shirt under her apron. Nothing flashy. Nothing that drew attention. That's exactly how she wanted it. Large black coffee, no sugar, she said, sliding a cup across the counter to a broad-shouldered SEAL with a fresh sunburn on his nose. Thanks, sweetheart, he said, barely looking at her. She didn't flinch at the word. She'd heard worse. The shop had been her aunt's before she passed. Marina inherited it 6 months ago, right when she needed an escape, a fresh start, a place where nobody knew her name or what she'd done, a place where she could disappear into the simple rhythm of grinding beans and wiping counters. But the SEALs didn't see her as anything more than the woman who poured their coffee. And that was fine. That was safer. Hey, Marina, called out a younger guy from the corner table. His name was Danny, maybe 25. Cocky grin. Always loud. You ever think about joining the Navy? We could use someone who makes coffee this good downrange. The other men at his table laughed. Marina smiled politely. I'll stick to the espresso machine, thanks. Smart girl, Danny said, leaning back in his chair. Leave the hard stuff to us, right, boys? More laughter. She turned away and kept working. She'd learned a long time ago that some battles weren't worth fighting, especially not with men who thought they already knew everything about you. The truth was, they didn't know anything. They didn't know that she'd spent 4 years in the army, that she'd been deployed twice to Afghanistan, that she'd seen more combat than half the men sitting in her shop. They didn't know about the firefight in Kandahar that left 3 of her unit dead, and her with a shattered left shoulder and burns across her ribs. They didn't know that she still woke up at 3 in the morning, drenched in sweat, hearing the sound of RPGs whistling through the air, and they definitely didn't know that she'd been medically discharged with a chest full of medals she kept in a shoebox under her bed because she couldn't stand to look at them. To them, she was just the coffee girl, and maybe that was easier. It was a Tuesday when Commander Eric Dalton walked into her shop for the first time. He wasn't like the others, older, maybe mid-40s, with silver creeping into his dark hair and a scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his temple. He didn't walk with the swagger of the younger SEALs. He moved carefully, deliberately, like a man who'd learned not to waste energy. He stood at the counter and studied the menu board, even though there were only 6 items on it. What do you recommend? He asked. Marina looked up, surprised. Most of them just barked their orders. Depends, she said. You want to taste it or just wake up? The corner of his mouth lifted. Taste it. Then the cold brew. I make it myself. 18-hour steep, he nodded. I'll take that. She poured it over ice and slid it across the counter. He paid in cash, left a $5 tip, and sat alone by the window. He came back the next day, and the day after that, always polite, always quiet, always alone. On the 4th day, he asked her name. Marina, she said. Eric Dalton, he replied, extending a hand. She shook it. His grip was firm but not crushing, the handshake of someone who had nothing to prove. You run this place by yourself? He asked. Mostly. I've got a part-timer on weekends. He nodded, sipping his coffee. It's good. Feels honest. She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and went back to cleaning the espresso machine. But something about him was different. He didn't look at her the way the others did. He didn't look through her. He looked at her like she was a person, not part of the furniture. It should have felt good. Instead, it made her nervous. 2 weeks later, the shop was packed. A whole platoon had just come back from a training exercise, and they were loud, wired, talking over each other about breaches and kill houses and who got the fastest time. Marina moved behind the counter like a machine. 4 lattes, 3 Americanos, 2 cold brews. She didn't stop moving. Danny was at the front of the line, still in his fatigues, face streaked with dust. Marina, babe, I need the largest thing you got. We've been up for 36 hours. Coming up, she said, already pulling the shot. You know, Danny said, leaning on the counter. You should come out with us sometime. See what real work looks like. One of his buddies snickered. Yeah, might toughen you up a bit. Marina's jaw tightened, but she kept her face neutral. She handed him the coffee. "On the house," she said quietly. Danny grinned. "See, she gets it. Good girl." She turned away before he could see her expression, but Commander Dalton saw it. He was sitting in his usual spot by the window, and his eyes tracked her as she moved back to the espresso machine. He didn't say anything, but he watched. It happened later that afternoon after the rush had cleared. Marina was taking out the trash through the back door when her sleeve rode up. Just for a second, just enough. She didn't notice. But Eric Dalton did. He'd been walking to his truck when he glanced toward the alley and saw her lifting the heavy bag into the dumpster, saw the edge of her sleeve pull back, saw the scar. It wasn't like other scars. It wasn't surgical or accidental. It was a burn scar, thick, mottled, running from her wrist halfway up her forearm, the kind you get from fire or an explosion, the kind that doesn't happen in a kitchen or a car accident, the kind that happens in war. Eric stopped walking. Marina turned and saw him standing there. Their eyes met. For just a heartbeat, something unspoken passed between them. She tugged her sleeve down quickly and walked back inside without a word. Eric stood in the alley for a long moment, staring at the door she'd disappeared through. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yeah, it's Dalton," he said quietly. "I need you to run a name for me, quiet, no flags." He paused. "Vasquez." "Marina Vasquez. Former Army, I think. Send me everything." He hung up and stared at the coffee shop. Something wasn't adding up. And Commander Eric Dalton had spent 20 years in the teams learning to trust his instincts. That night, Marina locked up the shop and drove home to her small apartment 3 blocks from the beach. She climbed the stairs slowly, her shoulder aching the way it always did when the weather changed. Inside, she microwaved a frozen dinner and sat on the couch in the dark, staring at nothing. She thought about the way Commander Dalton had looked at her in the alley, the way his eyes had narrowed just slightly, like he was solving a puzzle. She thought about pulling her sleeve down too late. Her phone buzzed. A text from her part-timer asking about the schedule. She answered and set the phone down. Then she walked to her bedroom, opened the closet and pulled out the shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were the things she never looked at. Her discharge papers, her Purple Heart, a photo of her unit, all of them smiling in front of a Humvee, dust on their faces and hope in their eyes. 3 of them were dead now. She closed the box and put it back. She didn't sleep much that night, and across town, in a small office on the base, Commander Eric Dalton sat in front of a computer screen, reading a file that made his blood run cold. Sergeant Marina Vasquez, Army Combat Medic, 2 deployments, Silver Star, Purple Heart. Honorable discharge following catastrophic injuries sustained during enemy contact. He scrolled further. Kandahar Province. Improvised explosive device. Vehicle fire. 3 KIA. Vasquez remained under fire for 40 minutes, treating wounded while enemy combatants advanced, credited with saving 4 lives. Eric leaned back in his chair. The woman pouring coffee every morning had done things most of his SEALs would never have the guts to do, and they treated her like she was invisible. He closed the file. Tomorrow, he thought, things were going to change. The next morning, Marina opened the shop at 4:30 like always. She flipped on the lights, started the grinders, and began the ritual that kept her sane. Measure, tamp, brew, repeat. The familiar smell of coffee filled the small space. Outside, the sky was still dark, but she could see the first hint of gray on the horizon. She didn't hear the door open. "Morning." Marina turned. Commander Dalton stood just inside, hands in his pockets. He was early, earlier than usual. "Morning," she said carefully. "Cold brew?" "Actually, I wanted to talk to you." Her stomach tightened. She kept her face neutral. "About what?" Eric walked to the counter slowly. He didn't sit, just stood there studying her with those calm, careful eyes. "How long were you in?" he asked quietly. The espresso machine hissed behind her. Marina's hand froze on the counter. "I don't know what you're talking about." 4 years, according to your file. Army. Combat medic. 2 deployments, her jaw clenched. "You had no right." "You're right," Eric said, raising a hand. "I didn't, and I'm sorry for that. But Marina, these men who come in here every day, they have no idea who you are." "That's the point," she said, her voice harder now. "I don't want them to know." "Why not?" She turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. Her knuckles went white. Because that part of my life is over. I'm not that person anymore. You think you can just stop being who you were? I have to. The words came out sharper than she meant. She took a breath, forced herself to calm down. Eric was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke softer this time. I saw the scar yesterday, on your arm. Marina pulled her sleeve down instinctively, even though it was already covering her wrist. It's none of your business. You're right again, Eric said. But I've been doing this job for 20 years and I know what combat does to people. I know what it costs. And I know that hiding from it doesn't make it go away. Marina turned to face him. Her eyes were hard, but there was something else behind them. Something raw. What do you want from me, Commander? Respect, he said simply. The respect you've earned. The respect these men should be giving you every single day. They don't need to respect me. They just need their coffee. That's not good enough. It's good enough for me. Eric held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right. I'll let it go. But if you ever change your mind, if you ever want someone to know the truth, I'm here. He left a $10 bill on the counter and walked out. Marina stood alone in the empty shop, her heart pounding. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw something. But instead, she just went back to making coffee. Because that's what she did now. That's all she was allowed to be. The rest of the week passed in uncomfortable silence. Commander Dalton still came in every morning, but he didn't push. He ordered his cold brew, said thank you, and sat by the window reading reports on his tablet. He didn't ask questions. Didn't bring up her past, but something had shifted. Marina caught him watching her sometimes. Not in a creepy way. In a thoughtful way. Like he was trying to figure out a problem he couldn't solve. It made her uneasy. The other SEALs didn't notice anything different. They still joked, still ordered her around, still treated her like part of the furniture. Danny was the worst. On Friday morning, he came in with his usual crew, loud and obnoxious, talking about a new guy who just failed out of selection. Dude couldn't even handle the pool. Danny laughed, panicked like a little girl. I'm telling you, some people just aren't built for this. His buddy nodded. It's not for everyone. Takes a special kind of person. Danny leaned on the counter while Marina made his drink. You know what I'm saying, right, Marina? Some people are warriors. Some people make coffee. Everybody's got their place. Marina slid his cup across the counter without looking at him. That'll be $4.50. Danny grinned and tossed a $5 on the counter. Keep the change, sweetheart. From the corner, Eric Dalton's jaw tightened. He set down his tablet and stood up. Marina saw him coming and shook her head slightly. A tiny gesture. A warning. Eric stopped. Met her eyes. Then sat back down, but his hands were clenched into fists. That afternoon, after the lunch rush, Marina was restocking the pastry case when the door chimed. She looked up and froze. Standing in the doorway was a man she hadn't seen in almost 2 years. Captain James Rivera, her old commanding officer. He looked older, thinner. There were new lines around his eyes and gray in his beard, but it was him. Hello, Marina, he said quietly. She straightened slowly, her heart hammering. Sir, you don't have to call me that anymore, he said with a sad smile. I'm retired now. Just Jim. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know why he was here. Jim walked to the counter and looked around the small shop. This is nice. Your aunt's place, right? Was she passed? I heard. I'm sorry. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Jim spoke again. I've been trying to find you for 6 months. You're not easy to track down. I didn't want to be found, I figured. He paused. Can we talk? Just for a few minutes. Marina glanced at the clock. The afternoon was slow. No one else was in the shop. Fine, sit. They sat at a corner table. Jim folded his hands on the surface, staring at them like he didn't know where to start. How are you doing? He finally asked. I'm fine. Marina, I'm fine, sir. I have a business. I have a routine. I'm managing. Jim looked at her. Really looked at her. And she saw the guilt in his eyes. You shouldn't have been discharged, he said quietly. You were one of the best combat medics I ever worked with. What you did that day in Kandahar. Don't, Marina said, her voice tight. Please don't. You saved 4 lives while taking fire. You held that position for 40 minutes with a dislocated shoulder and second-degree burns. You earned that silver star. And I also failed 3 soldiers who didn't make it home. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? Marina's voice cracked. I was the medic. I was supposed to save them. All of them. You did everything humanly possible. The IED. I know what the IED did. Marina's hand slammed on the table. She caught herself, took a breath, lowered her voice. I'm sorry. I can't talk about this. Jim reached across the table like he wanted to take her hand, then thought better of it. I didn't come here to make you relive it, he said. I came to tell you something. Something you deserve to know. Marina looked at him warily. What? Colonel Brennan. You remember him? She nodded. Brennan had been the base commander. Cold, political, more worried about optics than soldiers. He's being investigated, Jim said. Turns out he falsified reports, covered up equipment failures. The Humvee you were in that day. The one that got hit? Marina's breath caught. It had failed inspection 3 times, Jim continued. The armor plating was faulty. Brennan signed off anyway because replacing the vehicles would have gone over budget. He buried the reports. Marina felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Those men died because of faulty equipment? Yes. And Brennan knew? Yes. Marina stood up so fast her chair fell over. She turned away, hands shaking, trying to breathe. Marina, get out. I thought you should know. Get out. Her voice was raw, broken. Please, just get out. Jim stood slowly. He pulled a business card from his pocket and set it on the table. If you need anything at all, call me. He walked to the door, then paused. You were a damn good soldier, Marina. Don't let anyone tell you different. Not even yourself. Then he was gone. Marina stood alone in the empty shop, staring at nothing, her whole body trembling. 3 faces from the photo in her shoebox flashed through her. Mine. Carter. Rodriguez. Kim. They'd died because some colonel wanted to save money, and she'd been carrying the guilt for 2 years. She closed the shop. Early that day, she went home, opened the shoebox, and looked at the photo for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called the number Jim had left. It's Marina, she said when he answered. Tell me everything. Over the next 2 weeks, Marina learned the truth. Jim sent her the investigation files, emails, inspection reports. All of it buried, all of it covered up by Colonel Brennan and 2 other officers who wanted to protect their careers. The Army was building a case, but it was slow, political, quiet. The families of the soldiers who died didn't even know yet. Marina read every page, every document, every lie, and something inside her that had been buried for 2 years began to wake up. She wasn't just the coffee girl, she was a soldier, and soldiers didn't hide when there was a fight to be had. On Monday morning, Commander Eric Dalton walked into the shop and immediately knew something was different. Marina stood behind the counter, but there was a new energy to her. Her shoulders were straight, her eyes were sharp. Morning, Eric said carefully. Morning, Commander. She made his cold brew and slid it across the counter. As he reached for it, he saw something that made him pause. Her sleeve had ridden up just slightly, and she didn't pull it down. Eric looked at the scar on her forearm, then at her face. She met his eyes steadily. I've been thinking about what you said, Marina told him. About respect, yeah? You're right. I've earned it. And I'm tired of pretending I haven't. A slow smile spread across Eric's face. What changed? I remembered who I used to be, she said. And I decided she's not as dead as I thought. Eric picked up his coffee. Good. Because the woman I read about in that file? She's someone worth knowing. Thank you. So what now? Marina looked out the window at the seals starting to arrive for the morning rush. Now, she said quietly, now I stop hiding. The change didn't happen all at once. Marina didn't walk into the shop the next day and announce her past to everyone. She didn't hang her silver star on the wall or wear her service on her sleeve, but she stopped shrinking. When Danny made his usual jokes, she didn't just smile politely anymore. She met his eyes, held his gaze, let him see that she wasn't laughing. When the younger SEALs got loud and rowdy, treating the shop like their personal playground, she spoke up. Keep it down or take it outside, she said one morning, her voice calm but firm. The table went quiet. Danny looked at her with surprise. Whoa, someone's in a mood. No mood, Marina said. Just running a business. You want to act like children, do it somewhere else. One of the other guys started to say something, but Danny held up a hand. He was grinning, but there was something else in his expression now. Uncertainty. Yes, ma'am, he said, with just a hint of sarcasm. Marina turned back to the espresso machine. From his corner, Eric Dalton smiled into his coffee. The real shift came 2 weeks later. It was a Thursday morning and the shop was packed. A new SEAL team had just rotated in from Virginia, and they'd heard about Marina's coffee. The place was standing room only. Marina moved behind the counter like a machine, calling out orders, pulling shots, her hands never stopping. Her part-timer, a college kid named Jesse, worked the register while she handled the drinks. Everything was running smooth, until a tall SEAL with a buzz cut and a cocky smile pushed his way to the front of the line. Yo, sweetheart, I've been waiting 10 minutes. I need 2 large coffees, black, and make it fast. We've got a brief in 20. Marina didn't look up. There's a line. Wait your turn. I don't have time for this. Just make the coffee. Now she looked up. The shop had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. I said, wait your turn, Marina repeated, her voice level. I'll get to you when I get to you. The SEAL's face flushed. Do you know who I am? Don't know, don't care. Back of the line. For a moment it looked like he might argue. Then Danny, sitting at his usual table, let out a low whistle. Dude, just get in line. She doesn't play. The tall SEAL stared at Marina for another few seconds, then muttered something under his breath and moved to the back. The normal noise of the shop resumed. But Eric Dalton, watching from the window, saw something the others didn't. He saw Marina's hand shaking slightly as she went back to pulling espresso shots. He saw the way she took a deep breath before calling out the next order. She was pushing through, forcing herself to stand her ground even though every instinct probably told her to back down and disappear. That took courage, maybe more courage than fighting ever did. After the morning rush cleared, Eric approached the counter. That was well handled, he said. Marina wiped down the espresso machine, not looking at him. He was being a jerk, he was. And you shut him down. The old Marina wouldn't have done that. The old Marina isn't coming back, she said quietly. But maybe a new version can, Eric nodded. For what it's worth, I think that's the right call. Yeah, well, we'll see how long it lasts. It'll last as long as you want it to. Marina finally looked at him. You have a lot of faith in someone you barely know. I know enough, Eric said. I know you held a position under fire for 40 minutes. I know you saved 4 lives. I know you earned a silver star and a Purple Heart. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Marina's throat tightened. She turned away, pretending to organize the cups. That was a different person, a different life, was it? Eric asked. Or were you just told to believe that? Before Marina could answer, the door chimed. A woman in an army dress uniform walked in. She was maybe 50, with short gray hair and colonel's eagles on her shoulders. Her face was serious, professional. Marina's blood ran cold. Marina Vasquez? The woman asked. Yes. The woman walked to the counter and extended her hand. Colonel Patricia Vance, Army CID. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Marina's heart hammered. CID, Criminal Investigation Division, about what? About Colonel Brennan and the incident in Kandahar 2 years ago. The shop suddenly felt very small. Eric stepped forward. Ma'am, I'm Commander Eric Dalton, Naval Special Warfare. Is there something I can help with? Colonel Vance glanced at him, then back at Marina. This is Army business, Commander, but I appreciate the concern. It's fine, Marina said quietly. She looked at Jesse. Can you handle things for a bit? Jesse nodded, wide-eyed. Marina led Colonel Vance to the back office, a tiny room with a desk, a filing cabinet, and 2 chairs. Eric watched them go, his jaw tight. Inside the office, Colonel Vance sat down and pulled out a tablet. I'll get right to the point, Sergeant Vasquez. It's just Marina now. I was discharged. With honors, Vance said firmly. And you're still a sergeant in my book. The rank was earned. Marina didn't know what to say to that, Vance continued. I'm part of the team investigating Colonel Brennan and the equipment failures that led to multiple casualties in Kandahar. Your case is one of several we're looking at. Captain Rivera already told me about the investigation. I know. He's been very helpful. But we need more than documents. We need testimony. We need someone who was there, who saw what happened, to go on record. Marina's hands clenched in her lap. I already gave my statement. 2 years ago. After the incident, I've read it. It's thorough. But now we know that Brennan falsified reports and covered up critical safety failures. We need you to testify about what actually happened that day, not the sanitized version Brennan put in the official file. The truth. Marina felt her chest tighten. I can't, Sergeant. I said I can't. Marina's voice cracked. Do you have any idea what it took to get past that day? To stop seeing it every time I closed my eyes. I rebuilt my entire life so I wouldn't have to think about it anymore. I understand. No, you don't. Marina stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. You weren't there. You didn't watch your friends burn. You didn't hear them screaming. You didn't have to choose who to save and who to let die. Her voice broke on the last word. Colonel Vance sat quietly for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentler. You're right. I wasn't there. But I've read the reports. I know you stayed in that vehicle until you physically couldn't anymore. I know you pulled Corporal Mendez out with a dislocated shoulder. I know you treated Specialist Harris for 15 minutes while taking fire, knowing he probably wouldn't make it because you don't give up on people. Marina turned away, pressing her palms against the desk. And I know, Vance continued, that you've been carrying the weight of 3 deaths that weren't your fault, because a colonel cared more about his budget than his soldiers. Stop. Those families deserve the truth, Sergeant. Carter's mother, Rodriguez's wife, Kim's father. They deserve to know their loved ones didn't die because of bad luck or the enemy. They died because an officer failed them. Marina's shoulders shook. And if you don't testify, Vance said quietly, Brennan walks. He retires with full benefits and a pension. And the next time he makes a decision that puts money over lives, more families will be getting folded flags. Silence filled the small room. Marina stood there, breathing hard, her hands gripping the desk like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you need from me? Colonel Vance stayed for another hour, going through the details. The testimony would be part of a formal hearing. Marina would have to recount the events of that day in front of a panel of officers. Brennan would be there. His lawyers would be there. They would try to discredit her, question her memory, suggest her injuries affected her judgment. Can you handle that? Vance asked. Marina thought about the last 2 years. The nightmares. The guilt. The slow, painful process of learning to live with what happened. I don't know, she said honestly. But I'll try, Vance nodded. That's all anyone can ask. She stood and handed Marina a business card. The hearing is in 3 weeks. In San Diego. I'll send you all the details. If you need anything before then, support, counseling, legal advice, you call me. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Vance paused at the door. For what it's worth, Sergeant, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen a lot of soldiers. Good ones and bad ones. Heroes and cowards. You're one of the good ones. Don't let anyone make you forget that. Then she was gone. Marina sat alone in the office, staring at the business card. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to prepare to relive the worst day of her life. When she came out of the office, the shop was nearly empty. Just Eric Dalton still sitting by the window and Jesse wiping down tables. Eric stood when he saw her. You okay? Marina shook her head. No, but I will be. What did she want? Marina hesitated. Then for the first time in 2 years, she told someone the whole story. She told him about Kandahar, about the IED, about the fire and the screaming and the impossible choices. She told him about Carter and Rodriguez and Kim, about the guilt that never went away, and she told him about Brennan, about the covered-up inspections and the faulty armor and the hearing in 3 weeks. Eric listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You're going to testify? He finally asked. I have to. It's going to be hell. I know. Eric nodded slowly. Then he said something that surprised her. You shouldn't do it alone. What? The hearing. You'll need support. Someone in your corner. Marina shook her head. I can't ask anyone to... You're not asking. I'm offering. Commander, you don't have to... Eric, he corrected. And yes, I do. Because I've watched you serve coffee to SEALs who don't know a damn thing about who you really are. I've watched you take their jokes and their condescension with grace. And now I'm watching you stand up and do one of the hardest things a soldier can do. Tell the truth when it costs you everything. His voice was steady, certain. So yeah, he continued, I'll be there. And if you'll let me, I'd like to help you prepare. Marina felt tears burning behind her eyes. She blinked them back. Why? Because you're a warrior, Eric said simply. And warriors don't fight alone. That night, Marina didn't go straight home. She drove to the beach and sat in her car, watching the waves crash in the darkness. For 2 years, she'd been running, hiding, trying to become someone smaller, quieter, safer. But maybe Eric was right. Maybe you couldn't stop being who you were. Maybe the warrior was still in there, just waiting to be called back to duty. She pulled out her phone and looked at the photo from the shoebox. Carter Rodriguez and Kim, smiling. Alive. I'm going to make this right, she whispered. I promise. The waves kept crashing, and for the first time in a long time, Marina Vasquez felt like a soldier again. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Marina's life. Every morning, she opened the shop at 4:30. She made coffee, served the seals, kept the routine going. But now, every afternoon after closing, she met with Eric Dalton. He helped her prepare. They sat in her small apartment, going over the timeline of that day in Kandahar. Eric asked questions, hard questions, the kind she knew Brennan's lawyers would ask. He made her repeat details until she could recite them without breaking down. What time did the IED detonate? 14:37 local time. How many vehicles in the convoy? 4. We were third in line. How long between the explosion and when you reached Corporal Mendez? Marina closed her eyes. She could still smell the burning fuel, still hear the screaming. Maybe 30 seconds. It felt like hours. Eric's voice was gentle but firm. They're going to try to poke holes in your memory. They'll suggest the trauma affected your perception. You need to stay calm. Stick to the facts. I know. And if you need a break during testimony, you take it. There's no shame in that. Marina nodded, but they both knew she wouldn't take a break. She'd finish what she started. That's who she was. On the 5th day of preparation, Eric brought someone with him, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a Navy uniform. Commander Sarah Chen, a psychologist who worked with Special Operations Forces. I asked Sarah to come, Eric said. She specializes in helping soldiers deal with testimony related to combat trauma. Marina stiffened. I don't need a therapist. I'm not here to therapize you, Sarah said with a small smile. I'm here to give you tools, ways to manage the physiological response when you're reliving trauma. Breathing techniques, grounding exercises, things that'll help you get through the hearing without falling apart. Marina wanted to argue, but she also knew Sarah was right. The nightmares had gotten worse since she'd agreed to testify. She was averaging 3 hours of sleep a night. Her hands shook when she wasn't working. The weight of it was crushing her. Okay, she said quietly. Show me. For the next week, Sarah taught her how to breathe through panic, how to anchor herself to the present when her mind tried to drag her back to Kandahar, how to recognize the physical signs of a flashback before it took over. It helped. Not completely, but enough. Meanwhile, something else was happening at the coffee shop. Word had gotten around that Marina was closing early several days a week. Danny Evernosy asked her about it one morning. Hot date or something, he said with a grin. Or something, Marina replied, not looking up from the espresso machine. Come on, you can tell us. We won't judge. Marina slid his coffee across the counter. $4.50. Danny paid, but he didn't move. He leaned on the counter, studying her. You've been different lately, he said. More. I don't know. Serious. Maybe I've always been serious and you just didn't notice. That landed. Danny blinked, then laughed awkwardly. Yeah, maybe. He took his coffee and went back to his table, but Eric, watching from the window, saw the shift. Danny wasn't mocking anymore. He was curious, almost respectful. It was a start. 2 days before the hearing, Marina got a phone call. It was Captain Rivera. I wanted to check on you, he said. Make sure you're ready. As ready as I'll ever be. Vance told me you're doing this. I'm proud of you, Marina. She didn't know what to say to that. Jim continued. I also wanted you to know the families are coming. Carter's mother, Rodriguez's wife, Kim's father. They're going to be in the room. Marina's stomach dropped. They know? Vance contacted them last week. Told them about the investigation. They have a right to be there. I haven't seen them since the funerals. I know, but they want to thank you for trying to save their loved ones and for standing up now. Marina pressed a hand to her chest. Her heart was racing. I don't know if I can face them. Yes, you can, Jim said firmly. Because you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. And because they need this, Marina. They need to know the truth. And they need to see that someone fought for their sons, their husbands, their fathers, both then and now. After the call ended, Marina sat on the floor of her apartment and cried for the first time in months. Not from fear, from the weight of finally letting it all out. The morning of the hearing, Marina woke at 3 a.m. She didn't try to go back to sleep. She got up, made coffee, and stood in her kitchen in the dark, breathing the way Sarah had taught her, in for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Her hands were steady. At 0600, there was a knock on her door. Eric stood in the hallway wearing his dress uniform. Rows of ribbons covered his chest. His expression was calm, solid. Ready? He asked. No, Marina said. But let's go anyway. They drove to San Diego in Eric's truck. Marina wore a simple black dress and the only pair of heels she owned. She'd thought about wearing her uniform, but she didn't fit in it anymore. The injuries had changed her body. Changed everything. You don't need the uniform, Eric said, as if reading her thoughts. They'll see who you are without it. The hearing was held in a conference room at Naval Base San Diego. When Marina walked in, her breath caught. One side of the room was filled with Army officers. The panel, stern-faced men and women in dress uniforms seated behind a long table. On the other side sat Colonel Brennan and his 2 lawyers. Brennan was in his late 50s, silver-haired, with a face that looked carved from stone. He didn't look at her when she entered, and in the back of the room, in 3 chairs against the wall, sat the families. Mrs. Carter, a small woman with gray hair and red-rimmed eyes. Maria Rodriguez, young and beautiful, holding a photo of her husband, Mr. Kim. An older Korean man with his hands folded in his lap, his face expressionless. Marina's knees almost gave out. Eric's hand touched her elbow, steadying her. You've got this, he whispered. Colonel Vance approached. Sergeant Vasquez. Thank you for coming. You'll be called to testify in about 15 minutes. Until then, you can wait outside, or I'll stay, Marina said. She sat in the front row, Eric beside her. The hearing began. The first hour was technical. Officers reading reports, inspection documents entered into evidence, emails from Brennan ordering his subordinates to sign off on equipment despite failed safety checks. Brennan sat stone-faced through all of it. Then Colonel Vance stood. The panel calls Sergeant Marina Vasquez. Marina stood. Her legs felt like water, but she walked to the front of the room and sat in the witness chair. A female officer swore her in. Do you swear to tell the truth? The whole truth? And nothing but the truth? I do. Colonel Vance approached with a tablet. Sergeant Vasquez, can you state your name and rank for the record? Marina Vasquez, former Sergeant, United States Army, combat medic. Thank you. Can you describe the events of March 15th, 2 years ago in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan? Marina took a breath. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Then she began to speak. She told them everything, the convoy, the routine patrol, the moment the world exploded into fire and metal and screaming. She told them about crawling through the wreckage with a dislocated shoulder, about finding Mendez trapped under twisted steel, his legs crushed, about dragging him out while bullets sparked off the Humvee's frame. She told them about Rodriguez and Kim and Carter, about trying to stop the bleeding, about the impossible math of triage when you only have 2 hands and 4 people are dying. She told them about the fire spreading, about the smell of burning flesh, about holding Carter's hand while he died because there was nothing else she could do. Her voice never wavered. Behind her, she heard Mrs. Carter sobbing quietly. When she finished, the room was silent. Then one of Brennan's lawyers stood, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a sharp voice. Sergeant Vasquez, you suffered significant injuries during this incident, correct? Yes, including a head injury? Minor concussion, yes. And you were on pain medication immediately following the attack? For a few hours, yes. So is it possible that your recollection of events is clouded by trauma, pain medication, and the chaos of combat? Marina looked at him, then at Brennan, then back at the lawyer. No, she said clearly. I remember every second. I'll remember it for the rest of my life. But surely in the confusion, there was no confusion, Marina said, her voice rising. The Humvee was supposed to protect us. It didn't, the armor failed. The doors jammed. The fire suppression system didn't work. 3 men died because the equipment didn't do what it was supposed to do. That's not trauma talking. That's fact. The lawyer tried again. Sergeant, isn't it possible that you're looking for someone to blame because you feel guilty about the soldiers you couldn't save? The room went still. Marina stared at him, then she stood up. Yes, she said, her voice shaking now. I do feel guilty. Every single day. I feel guilty that I couldn't save all of them. I feel guilty that I survived when they didn't. I feel guilty that I got to come home and they got folded flags and closed caskets. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't stop. But I don't need to blame anyone to make myself feel better. I'm blaming Colonel Brennan because he signed off on faulty equipment to save money. I'm blaming him because he knew those Humvees were dangerous and he sent us out anyway. I'm blaming him because 3 families lost people they loved and it didn't have to happen. She pointed at Brennan. So don't you dare suggest that this is about my guilt. This is about his. The room erupted. The panel called for order. The lawyer tried to object. But Marina didn't sit down. She stood there shaking, tears on her face, finally saying everything she'd needed to say for 2 years. Colonel Vance stepped forward. The witness may step down. Marina walked back to her seat on trembling legs. Eric met her eyes. There was pride in his expression. And respect behind her. Mrs. Carter reached forward and touched Marina's shoulder. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for trying to save my son. Marina turned and took the older woman's hand. I'm sorry I couldn't do more. You did everything, Mrs. Carter said, crying. You gave him a chance. You gave him hope. That's all a mother can ask. The hearing continued for another 2 hours. More testimony, more evidence, more witnesses. But everyone in that room knew Marina's words had been the turning point. Finally, the panel dismissed everyone to deliberate. Marina stood outside in the hallway, leaning against the wall, exhausted. Eric brought her water. You did good in there. I lost it. No, you told the truth. There's a difference. Captain Rivera approached, smiling. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, Marina. I just couldn't hold it in anymore. Good, he said. You shouldn't have to. 3 hours later. The panel returned. Everyone filed back into the room. The senior officer, a 3-star general, stood. After reviewing the evidence and testimony, this panel finds that Colonel James Brennan knowingly falsified safety reports and authorized the use of equipment he knew to be defective. His actions directly contributed to the deaths of Specialist David Carter, Sergeant Luis Rodriguez, and Corporal Michael Kim. Mrs. Carter gasped. Maria Rodriguez closed her eyes. Mr. Kim bowed his head. The general continued. Colonel Brennan, you are hereby stripped of rank and will face court-martial for negligent homicide and conduct unbecoming an officer. You are dismissed from this hearing. Brennan's face went white. His lawyers started to protest. But the general slammed his gavel. This hearing is adjourned. Outside, the families found Marina. They hugged her, thanked her, told her she'd given them something they thought they'd never have. Justice. Mrs. Carter held Marina's face in her hands. You honored my son by telling the truth. You're a hero, sweetheart. Don't ever forget that. Marina couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. 2 weeks later, Marina stood behind the counter of her coffee shop. It was a normal morning. The SEALs were filing in, loud and energized, but something was different. Danny approached the counter and for once he wasn't grinning. Hey, Marina. Can I talk to you for a second? She looked up, surprised. Sure. He glanced at the other guys, then back at her. I heard about the hearing. About what you did. Marina's stomach tightened. How? Commander Dalton told us. Well, some of it. And I looked up the rest. The shop had gone quiet. All the SEALs were listening now. Danny continued. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. For all the jokes. For treating you like you were just, I don't know. Just the coffee girl. You're not. You're a legit war hero. And I was a jerk, Marina blinked. Danny, we all were, one of the other guys said, standing up. You earned respect a long time ago. We should have seen it. One by one, the SEALs stood, and then in the middle of her small coffee shop, they saluted her. Marina's throat closed. She saluted back, tears in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. That afternoon, Eric came in for his cold brew. How are you doing? He asked. Better, Marina said. And she meant it. Good. Because I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? Eric smiled. The teams are looking for someone to teach combat trauma response to our medics. Someone with real experience. Someone who's been there. Marina stared at him. You want me to teach SEALs? I want you to do what you were born to do. Save lives. Pass on what you know. Make a difference. Marina looked around her shop. At the espresso machine. At the tables where SEALs sat every morning. This place had been her refuge. Her hiding spot, but she didn't need to hide anymore. When do I start? She asked. Eric's smile widened. Whenever you're ready, Sergeant. 6 months later, Marina stood in front of a class of 20 Navy SEAL medics. She wore cargo pants and a black t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back. On her forearm, visible for everyone to see, was the burn scar she'd hidden for so long. My name is Marina Vasquez, she said. I'm a former Army combat medic. I served 2 deployments in Afghanistan. I was awarded the Silver Star and Purple Heart for actions under fire. She paused. But more importantly, I learned that being a medic isn't about the medals. It's about the people you save. And the people you can't. It's about making impossible choices and living with them. It's about being strong enough to keep going when everything in you wants to quit. The SEALs watched her, silent, respectful. So that's what I'm going to teach you, Marina said. Not just how to treat wounds, but how to be strong enough to do this job. How to carry the weight, and how to honor the people you couldn't save by saving the ones you can. She picked up a training dummy. Let's get to work. That evening, Marina drove home as the sun set over San Diego. She thought about Carter and Rodriguez and Kim. She thought about Mrs. Carter's words. You honored my son. She thought about the last 2 years. The hiding. The shame. The slow climb back to herself. And she thought about tomorrow. About the class she'd teach. About the lives she'd help save. She wasn't just the coffee girl anymore. She was Sergeant Marina Vasquez, combat medic, teacher, survivor, hero, and she was finally home.